The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk as Andrew walked home from basketball practice. His muscles ached pleasantly from the workout, and he was looking forward to dinner. The weather had finally turned nice after weeks of rain, so he decided to take the shortcut through Parkview, cutting his walk time by 15 minutes. Parkview wasn't like his neighborhood. The houses stood further apart, with perfect green lawns and three-car garages. Few black families lived in this part of town, but Andrew never thought much about it. His mind was on the math test coming up on Monday and whether coach would start him in next week's game. He adjusted his backpack, heavy with textbooks, and checked his phone. His mom had texted asking if he could pick up milk on the way home. He typed a quick sure and put his phone away. That's when he heard the sound of a car engine slowing down behind him. Andrew glanced back to see a police cruiser crawling alongside him. Then another pulled up ahead, blocking his path. His heart jumped into his throat. Two officers stepped out, hands resting near their belts. The taller one, with a crew cut and sunglasses, spoke first. "Hold up there, son. What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Andrew swallowed hard, trying to keep his voice steady. "Just walking home from school, sir. From basketball practice." The second officer circled behind him. Andrew could feel eyes watching from windows and passing cars. The officer in front, his nameplate read Brennan, looked him up and down. "We got a call about someone suspicious walking through the area. Can I see some ID?" Andrew's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his wallet. His father's voice echoed in his head. "Always be respectful. Always keep your hands visible. Never make sudden movements." "I'm just a student at Westlake High," Andrew explained, handing over his school ID. "I live about 20 minutes from here. This is just a shortcut." Officer Brennan studied the ID card while the other officer, Reynolds, according to his badge, moved closer. "What's in the backpack?" Reynolds asked, his tone making it sound like an accusation rather than a question. "Just my school stuff and basketball shoes." "Mind if we take a look?" Andrew knew it wasn't really a question. His father, a military man, had prepared him for moments like this. "Be cooperative, but know your rights," he'd said. "Do you have a reason to search my bag, sir?" Andrew asked politely. The officers exchanged glances. Brennan's jaw tightened. "Empty it. On the sidewalk. Now." A car slowed down as it passed. The driver, an older white woman, stared openly at the scene. Andrew felt his ears burning with embarrassment as he knelt down and began removing his belongings. His math textbook, history notes, basketball shoes, water bottle, protein bar. Each item was examined as if it might be stolen or dangerous. "I'd like to call my parents," Andrew said, reaching for his phone. "Hands where I can see them," Brennan snapped, grabbing the phone from Andrew's hand. "You can call them when we're done." Andrew took a deep breath. "My father works at the naval base. He's—" Officer Reynolds laughed. "Sure, kid, and I'm the Secretary of Defense." By now, several neighbors had stopped to watch. Some had their phones out, recording the interaction. Andrew felt like a criminal on display, though he hadn't done anything wrong. "Sit down on the curb," Brennan ordered, holding Andrew's phone and ID. As Andrew sat, he spotted Mrs. Chen from 3 streets over. She recognized him from the community center where he volunteered on weekends. Their eyes met, and she immediately pulled out her phone and made a call, walking quickly away. The officers stepped a few feet away, running Andrew's information through their system. The minutes stretched painfully. Cars slowed to rubberneck. A group of younger kids on bikes stopped to stare. Andrew fixed his eyes on his shoes, trying to look calm while his stomach twisted into knots. He thought about his father, who faced danger for real in his job, and tried to channel his strength. What Andrew didn't know was that across town, his father was about to receive an urgent message, and the officers had no idea who they were dealing with or who was about to arrive. Andrew sat on the curb, trying to keep his breathing steady. The concrete felt cold through his basketball shorts. He watched as Officer Brennan thumbed through his phone, checking his messages and photos like they might contain evidence of some crime. "Who's this?" Brennan asked, turning the screen to show a family photo. "That's my family," Andrew replied quietly. "My parents and little sister." The officer studied the photo. It showed Andrew's family at the beach last summer, his mother smiling in a sun hat, his father's arm around her shoulders, his 10-year-old sister making a peace sign. "Your dad's in the military?" Officer Reynolds asked, noticing the military-style haircut and posture of the man in the photo. "Yes, sir, that's what I was trying to tell you." Andrew kept his voice respectful despite the humiliation burning in his chest. "He works at the naval base." Reynolds scoffed again, but something in his eyes flickered, a moment of uncertainty. More cars had slowed down. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered at a distance, watching the scene unfold. Andrew recognized Mr. Wilson from the house on the corner, frowning as he approached. "What's going on here, officers?" Mr. Wilson asked. "This young man helps my son with math tutoring." "This is police business, sir," Brennan said firmly. "Please step back." Andrew felt a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. He didn't want to be seen like this, sitting on the curb like a criminal, his belongings scattered on the sidewalk. Officer Reynolds knelt down and picked up Andrew's basketball shoes, expensive ones his parents had given him for his birthday after he made the varsity team. "How'd you afford these?" he asked, examining the brand. The question stung like a slap. Andrew bit back the angry response that rose to his lips. "My parents bought them for my birthday," he answered instead. "I made varsity this year." A woman stepped out of her SUV across the street. She had a smartphone in her hand, clearly recording the scene. Andrew dropped his gaze to his hands, wishing he could disappear. "Stand up," Brennan ordered suddenly. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Andrew's heart hammered against his ribs. "Why?" "I didn't do anything wrong." "Don't argue with me. Stand up now." The fear that had been simmering inside him boiled over into panic. His father had warned him about moments like this too. If they want to cuff you, don't resist. We'll handle it later. Getting home safe is what matters. Slowly, Andrew rose to his feet and turned around. The cold metal of handcuffs clicked around his wrists. He could hear murmurs from the growing crowd of onlookers. "This is unnecessary," Mr. Wilson protested. "He's just a kid walking home." "He was uncooperative," Reynolds responded. "Questioned our authority to search his bag." Andrew felt tears threatening to form, but blinked them back. He wouldn't cry. Not here, not like this. Mrs. Chen had returned, standing at the edge of the crowd with her phone pressed to her ear. She caught Andrew's eye and gave him a small nod, as if to say help was coming. A teenager from Andrew's school rode by on his bike, eyes widening at the sight of Andrew in handcuffs. He stopped, pulled out his phone, and started filming. "Hey, Andrew, you okay, man?" the boy called out. Andrew couldn't answer. His throat felt tight, choked with humiliation and fear. "Move along," Brennan told the boy. "This doesn't concern you." "I'm just checking on my classmate," the boy replied, continuing to record. "What did he do?" The officers ignored him, turning back to Andrew. "We're going to take you to the station until we can verify your identity and what you're doing in this neighborhood," Brennan said, guiding Andrew toward the police cruiser. The growing number of witnesses made Andrew feel both more afraid and somehow safer. At least people were watching. At least there would be evidence of whatever happened next. As Officer Brennan opened the back door of the cruiser, the sound of tires squealing around the corner caught everyone's attention. A black SUV with government plates skidded to a stop at the edge of the gathering crowd. The driver's door flew open, and a tall man in a crisp naval uniform stepped out. Even from a distance, the authority in his bearing was unmistakable. The crowd parted as he strode forward, his face a mask of controlled fury. Andrew felt a wave of relief wash over him. His father had arrived. 20 minutes earlier, Commander Thomas Johnson sat in a secure briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command. The walls were lined with maps and classified information about upcoming operations. As one of the few black officers to reach his rank in the SEAL teams, he had spent 22 years serving his country through multiple combat deployments. The admiral at the front of the room was discussing threat assessments when Thomas felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. Military protocol dictated he ignore it, but something made him glance down. 3 missed calls from Andrew. That wasn't like his son at all. Then a text message appeared from their neighbor. "Your son is being detained by police on Maple Street. Come quickly." Thomas felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He'd had the talk with Andrew when he turned 12. the conversation black parents across America have with their children about how to survive encounters with police. Be polite. Don't argue. Keep your hands visible. Call me immediately. He raised his hand, interrupting the Admiral mid-sentence. Sir, family emergency. I need to be excused. The Admiral, who had worked with Thomas for years, nodded without hesitation. Go. Thomas rushed from the room, already dialing his wife's number as he headed for his vehicle. She answered on the first ring. Lisa, he said, his voice tense but controlled. Andrew's been stopped by police on Maple Street. I'm heading there now. Lisa Johnson, a cardiothoracic surgeon who had just finished a 5-hour operation, felt her professional composure crack. Is he hurt? I don't know details. I'll call you when I get there. As Thomas drove, his mind raced between combat-honed tactical thinking and the raw fear of a father. He had faced terrorists and enemy fire, but nothing terrified him more than knowing his son was in danger and he wasn't there to protect him. He pressed the accelerator harder, weaving through traffic. The government-issued SUV responded to his urgency. 5 minutes. He would be there in 5 minutes. Thomas thought about Andra, his quiet, thoughtful son who played basketball and wanted to study engineering. The boy who still called him Sir sometimes, a habit picked up from military life. The teenager who helped neighbors with yard work and never missed his little sister's dance recitals. His phone rang. It was Mrs. Chen from their neighborhood. Commander Johnson, they've put handcuffs on him, she said, her voice shaking with anger. There's a crowd here now. People are recording. Thomas felt a rage so pure it almost blinded him. He forced himself to breathe deeply, using the same techniques that had kept him alive in combat zones. Losing control wouldn't help Andra. I'm almost there, he said. As he turned onto Maple Street, he saw the gathering crowd first. Then the police cruisers, lights still flashing. And there, being guided toward the back of a police car, was Andra, his son, his pride, in handcuffs. Thomas parked haphazardly and stepped out, still in his full naval uniform with rows of combat ribbons across his chest. The commander's insignia gleamed in the afternoon sun. The crowd noticed him immediately. A path cleared as he walked forward with a purposeful stride that had become second nature after decades of military service. He saw the moment when Officer Brennan realized something was wrong. The officer's hand instinctively moved toward his weapon as the imposing figure in military uniform approached, then froze when he recognized the rank and decorations. That's his dad, someone in the crowd whispered loudly. Thomas locked eyes with his son first. Andrew's face showed relief mingled with lingering fear and humiliation. Then Thomas turned his attention to the officers. Remove those handcuffs from my son, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding elite warriors in life-or-death situations. It wasn't a shout. He didn't need to shout to be heard. Officer Reynolds stepped forward. Sir, we're conducting police business here. I'll need you to step back. I am Commander Thomas Johnson, United States Navy SEALs, Thomas replied, producing his military ID with practiced efficiency. And that is my 16-year-old son you have in handcuffs. I won't ask again. A ripple went through the crowd. Phones recorded the confrontation from every angle. Officer Brennan glanced at his partner, uncertainty replacing his earlier confidence. The commander standing before them wasn't just any angry parent. His bearing, his uniform, the quiet authority in his voice, everything about him demanded respect. We received reports of a suspicious person in the neighborhood. Brennan began, his explanation sounding hollow even to his own ears. Uncuff my son, Thomas repeated. Now. The second police cruiser's radio crackled to life. The voice on the other end asked for a status update, and in that moment, as the officers hesitated, Thomas heard the sound of another car arriving quickly. He didn't need to look to know it was his wife. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Commander Thomas stood perfectly still, his military training evident in his posture. He didn't fidget or raise his voice, he didn't need to. His presence alone had changed the entire mood of the scene. Dad, Andrew said, his voice cracking slightly. It's okay, son, Thomas replied without taking his eyes off Officer Brennan. Everything's going to be fine now. Officer Reynolds shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his partner. The growing crowd of onlookers had fallen silent, watching the standoff with held breath. Several people were still recording with their phones. "Sir, we were responding to a call about a suspicious person." Officer Brennan tried again, his tone noticeably more respectful than it had been with Andra. "We have procedures we need to follow." "What was suspicious about my son walking home from basketball practice?" Thomas asked, his voice level but with an edge that made both officers straighten their postures instinctively. Was it the textbooks? The school ID? Or was it just the color of his skin? The question hung in the air. No one in the crowd made a sound. Before either officer could respond, a silver car pulled up behind Thomas's SUV. Dr. Lisa Johnson stepped out, still wearing her hospital scrubs under her coat. Her face was a mask of controlled fury as she strode toward her son. "Take those handcuffs off my child right now," she demanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who regularly gave life or death orders in operating rooms. Officer Reynolds reached for his keys, but Brennan put a hand on his arm, stopping him. "Ma'am, we're conducting an investigation." "I'm not ma'am, I'm Dr. Johnson," Lisa interrupted, pulling out her hospital ID. "And that is my son who has done absolutely nothing wrong. Remove those handcuffs immediately, or I promise you'll be explaining yourselves to your chief, the mayor, and our attorney." A police supervisor's car pulled up. Someone had called for backup. A middle-aged officer with sergeant's stripes got out, taking in the scene with experienced eyes. Two officers, a handcuffed teenager, an angry crowd with recording phones, and two professional parents, one in a naval commander's uniform covered with combat decorations, the other in surgical scrubs. "What's going on here, Brennan?" the sergeant asked, approaching the group. "We received a call about a suspicious person in the neighborhood, sir," Brennan explained, his confidence faltering under his supervisor's gaze. This young man matched the description. "What description?" Thomas asked sharply. What exactly was this suspicious behavior? The sergeant turned to Thomas, recognizing his rank. "Commander," he acknowledged with a nod. "Is this your son?" "Yes. My son Andrew was walking home from basketball practice when your officers stopped him, searched his belongings, took his phone, and put him in handcuffs. All for the crime of walking through this neighborhood while black." The bluntness of Thomas's words caused a murmur through the crowd. The sergeant's expression tightened. "Uncuff him," he ordered Brennan. The officer complied immediately, releasing Andrew from the handcuffs. Andrew rubbed his wrists as his mother wrapped an arm around his shoulders. The relief on his face was visible, but so was the lingering humiliation of being treated like a criminal in front of neighbors and classmates. "Are you hurt?" Lisa asked quietly, examining her son with a doctor's trained eye. "I'm okay, Mom," Andrew replied, though his voice trembled slightly. Thomas collected Andrew's scattered belongings from the sidewalk, carefully placing each item back in the backpack while maintaining eye contact with the officers. The deliberate way he moved spoke volumes. This was a man reclaiming his son's dignity item by item. "Sergeant," Thomas said once he finished, "I'll need your badge numbers as well as those of your officers. I'll also need a copy of the call that prompted this stop and any body camera footage." "Of course, sir," the sergeant replied, recognizing the storm brewing. "We can provide all of that." "Good, because this isn't over." Thomas handed the backpack to Andra. "Not even close." The crowd had grown larger. Mr. Wilson, who had tried to intervene earlier, stepped forward. "I saw the whole thing," he told Thomas. "I tried to tell them he chewed as my son. They wouldn't listen." "Thank you," Lisa said, pulling out her business card. "We may need your statement." Thomas placed a hand on Andrew's shoulder. "Let's go home, son." As they turned to leave, Officer Brennan called out, "We were just doing our job." Thomas stopped and turned around slowly. The look in his eyes made the officer take a step back. "No," Thomas said, his voice carrying to everyone watching. "Your job is to protect and serve. What you did today was profile and harass, and trust me when I say you picked the wrong family to do it to." With that, the Johnson family walked to their cars, heads held high despite the whispers and stares that followed them. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. That evening, the Johnson family sat in their living room, trying to process what had happened. Andrew sat between his parents on the sofa, while his little sister Zoe colored quietly in the corner, sensing the serious mood in the room. I'm sorry, Dad, Andrew said suddenly, breaking the silence. Thomas looked at his son, surprised. What on earth are you sorry for? I don't know, for causing trouble, for making you leave your meeting. Lisa took her son's hand. Listen to me. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Those officers were wrong, not you. Thomas nodded in agreement. You followed everything I taught you. You stayed calm. You were respectful. I'm proud of you. Andrew looked down at his hands. It was scary, he admitted quietly. When they put the handcuffs on me, I thought about all those stories on the news. His parents exchanged a pained look over his head. This was exactly what they had feared since the day he was born, that despite their success, despite raising him to be polite and respectful, despite his good grades and athletic achievements, their son would still be seen as a threat simply because of his skin color. The video is already online, Zoe announced from her corner, holding up her tablet. It's got thousands of views. Thomas took the tablet, watching the footage someone had uploaded. It showed the confrontation from the moment he arrived, his military uniform clear in the frame, the officers' discomfort obvious as they realized who they were dealing with. The doorbell rang. Lisa went to answer it, returning with their neighbor Mrs. Chen and her husband. We wanted to check on Andra, Mrs. Chen said, handing over a container. And bring you some dinner. I doubt anyone feels like cooking tonight. Thank you, Lisa said sincerely. Mr. Chen, a retired lawyer, sat down across from Thomas. I've already spoken with 3 other neighbors who witnessed what happened. They're all willing to provide statements. The phone rang. Thomas answered it, his expression growing more serious as he listened. That was Captain Rivera from the naval base, he said after hanging up. The video reached him. He wants me to know I have the full support of the command if we decide to pursue this. When, Lisa corrected firmly, when we decide to pursue this. Andrew looked between his parents. What does that mean? Thomas sat forward, resting his elbows on his knees. It means we have a choice. We can let this go, try to move past it, and hope it doesn't happen again. Or we can use what happened to try to create change. The police chief has already called twice, Lisa added. They know they messed up. They're worried about bad publicity. But it's not just about us, Thomas continued. It's about the next kid who doesn't have a Navy SEAL commander for a father or a surgeon for a mother. The kid who might not be as lucky as you were today. Andrew thought about this. What would we have to do? File a formal complaint, possibly a lawsuit, speak at community meetings. It won't be easy. People will say we're overreacting, that the officers were just doing their job. There will be interviews, Lisa added. Your name and face might be in the news. Andrew was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked up at his father. You always say that when something's wrong, good people have to stand up and say something. Thomas smiled sadly. I do say that. Then I think we have to do it, Andrew said, his voice stronger now. Not just for me, for everyone. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Mr. Wilson and his son Tyler, Andrew's tutoring student. I hope we're not interrupting, Mr. Wilson said. Tyler was worried about Andra. The younger boy stepped forward awkwardly. I told my dad we should call the news. What those cops did wasn't right. Andra managed a small smile. Thanks, man. As the evening went on, more neighbors stopped by. Some brought food, others just came to show support. The phone kept ringing. Friends who had seen the video, Lisa's colleagues from the hospital, Thomas's fellow officers. By midnight, when the house was finally quiet again, Thomas sat at the kitchen table reviewing the official complaint form he would submit the next day. Lisa joined him, placing a cup of tea at his elbow. Are we doing the right thing? She asked quietly. It's going to be hard on him. Thomas looked toward the stairs where their children slept. We're doing the necessary thing, he replied. Andrew's stronger than we give him credit for. Lisa nodded, taking her husband's hand. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. The first of many, Thomas agreed, his jaw set with determination. But we're just getting started. By the next morning, the video had gone viral. Local news stations were running the story with headlines like Navy SEAL Commander's son racially profiled in upscale neighborhood and military hero confronts officers who handcuffed his teenage son. Amber came downstairs to find his parents already at the kitchen table with Mr. Chen, the retired lawyer, and a woman he didn't recognize. This is Diane, Thomas introduced her. She's a civil rights attorney. Diane smiled warmly at Andra. I've heard a lot about you. How are you holding up? Andra shrugged, grabbing a piece of toast. Okay, I guess. He glanced at the TV in the living room, where his father's face appeared on the morning news. That's weird. It's going to get weirder, Lisa warned, sliding a glass of orange juice toward him. The police department released a statement this morning. She handed him her phone. The statement was brief and carefully worded. The department is investigating an incident involving the temporary detention of a juvenile. We take all complaints seriously and are reviewing the officer's body camera footage. We remain committed to serving all members of our community with respect. That's it? Andra asked, frowning. They didn't even say they were sorry. That's why we're here, Diane explained. Public statements like that are designed to make problems go away quietly. But we're not going to let that happen. The doorbell rang again. It had barely stopped ringing since yesterday. This time it was a reporter from the local news station, asking for an interview. Thomas politely but firmly sent her away. We'll make a statement when we're ready, he told her. By midday, the family's phone was ringing nonstop. Friends, fellow military families, community members, all calling to offer support. But there were also calls from strangers who had seen the video and wanted to share similar experiences. It happened to my son too, one mother told Lisa, her voice breaking. But we didn't have anyone to stand up for us. No one believed us. Lisa took careful notes of each call, building a file that was growing thicker by the hour. At 3 o'clock, Thomas and Lisa left for a meeting with the police chief, leaving Andra with his sister and their neighbor Mrs. Chen. They returned 2 hours later, their faces grim. They offered us an apology, Thomas told Andra, and a promise to review training procedures. What did you say? Andra asked. We said it wasn't enough, Lisa replied, setting her purse down with more force than necessary. They want this to go away. One family, one incident, one apology, and back to business as usual. Thomas paced the living room, still in his uniform from the meeting. The chief kept saying it was an isolated incident, but the phone calls we've been getting all day tell a different story. Diane arrived for their evening meeting, along with 2 community organizers who had reached out after seeing the video. The police department is hoping this will blow over, Diane explained as they gathered around the dining room table. They're counting on the public's short attention span. Next week there will be a new story, and everyone will forget about what happened to Andra. So what do we do? Andra asked. One of the organizers, a tall man named Ray, who ran a youth program in their district, leaned forward. We keep the pressure on. We use the attention this video is getting to push for real changes. What kind of changes? Lisa asked. Body cameras that can't be turned off, Ray suggested. Mandatory reporting for all stops and searches. Civilian oversight committees with actual power. And bias training that's more than just checking a box, added the other organizer, a woman named Tanya, who had been fighting for police reform for years. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. We need to be strategic. The department is expecting protests and anger. They know how to handle that. But they don't know how to handle a Navy commander with combat decorations and community support, Diane pointed out. You bring something different to this fight. As the discussion continued into the evening, Andra listened quietly. This wasn't just about him anymore. Each suggestion, each idea built towards something bigger than one incident on one street. When his phone buzzed with a text, he checked it under the table. It was from a classmate. Saw what happened. Starting a student group to support you. Already got 50 people. You in? Andrew looked up at the adults around the table, his parents, their neighbors, the professionals who had stepped up to help. They were planning a response that would take months, maybe years. He texted back a single word, yes. This wasn't going to blow over. This wasn't going to be forgotten. This was just the beginning. 6 months passed. The seasons changed from fall to winter and winter to spring. What had happened to Andra on that sidewalk might have been forgotten in the constant churn of news stories, but the Johnson family had made sure it wasn't. On a bright May morning, Andra stood beside his parents on the steps of City Hall. His tie felt too tight, but his father had insisted. Dress for the occasion, not for comfort, Thomas had said as he straightened it one last time before they left home. The mayor stood at a podium, cameras flashing as she held up a document for all to see. "Today marks a new chapter for our police department and our community," she announced. "The Citizen Oversight and Accountability Act will ensure that what happened to Andrew Johnson never happens to another young person in our city." The crowd applauded. Andrew spotted his classmates in the audience, wearing T-shirts they had designed with the slogan, "Walk Without Fear." His little sister Zoe beamed from the front row, sitting between Mrs. Chen and Mr. Wilson. The last 6 months had been harder than Andrew had expected. There were uncomfortable meetings where police officials tried to downplay what had happened. There were online comments from people who said he must have been doing something wrong. There were even a few teachers at school who seemed uncomfortable around him now, as if he was a troublemaker. But there had also been unexpected allies. The student group had grown to over 200 members. Veterans from his father's unit had shown up at community meetings in uniform, standing silently at the back of the room as a show of support. His mother's hospital colleagues had raised money for a scholarship fund for students interested in criminal justice reform. And most surprisingly, there was Officer Reynolds. After the signing ceremony, as people mingled on the City Hall lawn, Andrew noticed the officer standing awkwardly at the edge of the crowd. He wore a suit instead of his uniform, and he kept glancing around as if unsure of his welcome. Thomas noticed him too. With a hand on Andrew's shoulder, he guided his son through the crowd. "Officer Reynolds," Thomas said, his voice neutral. "Commander Johnson," Reynolds nodded, then looked at Andrew. I wanted to congratulate you. The new policies, they're good. They're what we should have had all along." Andrew wasn't sure what to say. This was the man who had handcuffed him, who had questioned his expensive basketball shoes as if he couldn't possibly have gotten them honestly. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," Reynolds continued, seeming to read Andrew's thoughts. "I'm here because I wanted you to know that the training program you helped design, it's making a difference. It's making me a better officer." Part of the settlement the Johnsons had reached with the department required all officers to complete an intensive bias training program that Thomas and Lisa had helped develop. Reynolds had been among the first group to go through it. "I have a 16-year-old brother," Reynolds said, looking directly at Andrew now. "After what happened with you, I keep thinking about how I'd feel if someone treated him the way we treated you. I'm sorry. Truly." The apology wasn't what Andrew had expected. It wasn't polished or formal. It sounded real, almost painful. "Thank you for coming today," Andrew said finally, offering his hand. As they shook hands, a photographer captured the moment, the officer and the teenager he had wrongfully detained, finding a path forward. Later, as the family drove home, Zoe asked, "Does this mean it's over now?" Andrew looked out the window at the streets of their city. He thought about Tyler, his tutoring student, who now wanted to become a civil rights lawyer. He thought about the community meetings that would continue, with or without his family's involvement. He thought about the other families who had come forward with their own stories, finding the courage to speak up. "No," he answered his sister. "It's not over. It's just different now." Thomas caught his son's eye in the rearview mirror and nodded with pride. That evening, Andrew sat at his desk working on college application essays. The prompt asked about a challenge he had faced and how it had affected him. He began typing, "6 months ago, I was handcuffed on a sidewalk for the crime of walking while black. I could have let that moment define me as a victim. Instead, my family, and I chose to use it as a catalyst for change." He paused, thinking about everything that had happened, the fear, the anger, the hard work, and finally, the satisfaction of seeing real results. "What I learned," he continued writing, "is that justice doesn't just happen. People make it happen, and sometimes those people look like me."